Salem has always been remembered for fire, for smoke, for the sound of accusations whispered in tight wooden rooms while winter pressed its frozen palms against the windows. But the truth is, Salem was never afraid of fire. It was afraid of the ocean. Long before the trials, before the courtrooms and the gallows, and the names that would be carved into history like splinters under the skin, Salem was a port town that faced the Atlantic with the tense devotion of a congregation staring at a silent god. Ships left its harbor swollen with ambition and returned carrying sugar, rum, whale oil, and sometimes nothing at all but the echo of something that followed them home. The fishermen were the first to speak of her. Not in daylight. Never in daylight. They spoke of her in taverns, when the candles burned low and the room smelled of salt and damp wool. Te Kayed, the daughter of the deep, though none of them agreed on what she truly was. Some said she was a woman from the waist up and something older below. Some said she had no tail at all, only legs that ended in torn skin, as though she had once tried to walk on land and the sea had punished her for it. Others insisted she was not beautiful. That was the first lie the ocean told you. They agreed on only one thing. She knew your name before you told her. The earliest written record of her does not come from a fisherman, but from a Puritan minister in 1691, 1 year before the hysteria that would turn neighbor against neighbor. In a personal journal discovered centuries later in a sealed attic trunk, he wrote of a presence beyond the breakers that sings in a tongue not given by God, yet calls each man as though it baptized him itself. He did not call her a mermaid. He called her a witness. The story begins in the winter of 1703, when a ship called the Morning Bride prepared to depart from Salem Harbor. It was a modest vessel, captained by a man named Elias Harrow, a widower with a voice like cracked wood and a daughter of 13 who refused to remain on shore. Her name was Miriam. Miriam Harrow had grown up with salt in her lungs and rope burns on her palms. She knew the harbor better than the church pews. While other girls memorized scripture, she memorized tides. While sermons thundered about sin, she listened to the wind and learned that it changed its mind faster than any preacher. On the morning the Morning Bride left port, the sea was unnaturally still. The kind of stillness that does not feel peaceful. The kind that feels like breath being held. 3 days into the voyage, the crew reported hearing something beneath the hull. Not scraping, not impact. Singing. It was faint at first, a vibration that moved through the planks and into their bones. A melody without language, yet intimate in a way that unsettled them. One sailor swore the sound formed syllables only when he closed his eyes. Another insisted it was merely wind trapped in the boards. Elias Harrow ordered them to ignore it. On the 5th night, the youngest crewman vanished. There was no splash, no cry, only an empty coil of rope where he had been standing moments before. The sea remained calm, too calm. Miriam was the first to see her. It happened at dawn, when the sky was the color of bruised silver and the ocean lay flat as hammered metal. Miriam leaned over the rail, searching the water for any sign of the missing sailor. That was when she saw a shape just beneath the surface. A face. Not drifting. Watching. The eyes were open and unblinking. Pale as fog, the hair floated around her like dark ink released into water. And though her lips did not move, Miriam felt something brush against her thoughts, like fingers trailing through pages. Miriam. She recoiled. She had not spoken her name. The face did not disappear. It rose slowly, breaking the surface without ripple or spray. Her skin was the color of drowned parchment, her mouth curved in something that might have been curiosity. "Come closer," the voice said. But the voice did not pass through air. It passed through memory. Miriam stumbled back, striking the deck. The crew rushed forward, but by the time they reached the rail, the water was empty. That night, the singing grew louder. One by one, the sailors began hearing their own names woven into the melody. Not suited, not demanded. Invited. A harmony built from personal history, childhood nicknames, forgotten middle names, the sound of a mother calling from a distant shore. On the 7th night, 2 more men walked into the sea. They did not jump. They stepped down as though descending invisible stairs. Elias Harrow locked his daughter below deck. He ordered the sails cut and the course reversed, but the wind had turned. It blew against them no matter how they adjusted. The compass spun lazily, useless as a drunk. Miriam did not sleep. She pressed her ear against the hull and listened to the voice beneath the wood. It was not hungry. That realization frightened her more than anything. Hungry creatures take. This one remembered. On the 9th night, Miriam unlocked the hatch. The deck was empty except for her father, standing at the bow, staring into darkness. The sea was black glass, and there she was, no longer distant, no longer submerged, but upright in the water as though standing on a surface that did not yield. "Return what you took," Elias whispered. The figure tilted her head. "You named her," the voice replied. The crew had found a girl adrift weeks earlier, half dead, tangled in wreckage from a ship that never reached port. They brought her aboard briefly, before fear took hold. Fear of disease, of bad omen, of witchcraft. They returned her to the sea before sunset. They had not asked her name, but she had told it to the ocean. The daughter of the deep did not devour sailors. She collected debts. "You left her between worlds," the voice said, now carrying through air and bone alike. "I gave her a name so she would not vanish." Elias fell to his knees. Miriam stepped forward. "She told you mine," Miriam said. The figure's eyes shifted to her. "I know all names given to water," she replied. "Yours was spoken at birth over a basin." Baptism. Miriam felt something unravel inside her, a thread connecting church and sea, ritual and tide. "What do you want?" she asked. The ocean answered first. It began to rise, not in waves, in breath. The sea inhaled, drawing the mourning bride downward inch by inch, wood groaning in protest. "Witness," the figure said softly, then she vanished. By morning, the ship was gone. Years later, fragments of its hull washed ashore in Salem harbor. No bodies were recovered. No cargo. Only Miriam Harrow. She was found walking from the tide line at dawn, barefoot, silent, hair threaded with salt. She did not speak for 3 days. When she finally did, she asked for a basin of water. The townspeople, wary of anything tied to the sea, complied. She knelt before it, as though before an altar. "She remembers," Miriam said. "Who? They?" "Ask it." "The ocean." Miriam grew older, but she never married. She never left Salem. She spent her days near the docks, watching departures. Sometimes she would approach sailors before they boarded and whispered something that made their faces drain of color. Years passed without incident, until Kaseributujoratus Dopulusatu. That was the year Salem experienced a series of disappearances, unlike any before, men with no connection to one another. Merchants, dock workers, a visiting magistrate, vanished within sight of the harbor. There were no storms, no struggle, just absence. Miriam was seen walking into the surf one evening at twilight. Witnesses claimed the water did not wet her dress. They claimed she spoke to someone unseen. After that night, she was never seen again. But the disappearances stopped. For a time. Generations later, during the height of Salem's maritime trade, captains began reporting a peculiar phenomenon. On certain nights when the tide was unusually low and the fog pressed heavy against the masts, they heard singing beneath their vessels. It did not lure. It recited. Names. Old names. Names pulled from baptismal records, from gravestones, from ledgers long rotted by salt air, and sometimes, took rarely, a name not yet given. In the archives of Salem's Maritime Museum, there is an unmarked logbook from 1876. Inside, a captain described seeing a woman standing waist-deep in the harbor during a moonless night. Her hair spread across the water like spilled ink. Around her stood shapes just beneath the surface, silhouettes with open eyes. Witnesses not. Drowned. Remembered. The captain wrote one final line before the ink trailed off. "She is not taking us, she is counting." In modern Salem, tourists crowd the streets for stories of witches and curses. They photograph houses. They buy charms. They light candles for tragedies centuries old. But fishermen still check the tide before dusk, and some of them swear that when the harbor goes unnaturally still, when the Atlantic flattens into a mirror that reflects nothing but sky. They hear something beneath their boat, not singing. Listening. Waiting for a name to be spoken carelessly over water. Because the daughter of the deep does not punish the innocent. She punishes the forgotten, and Salem has forgotten many. The final record tied to her surfaced only recently, a water-damaged birth registry from 1690, discovered during restoration work in an old church near the harbor. Most names were illegible. Ink bled beyond recognition. All except one, written in darker script than the rest. Miriam. No surname, no parents listed. Only a note in the margin, found between tides. Which means one of two things. Either Elias Harrow brought his daughter to sea and lost her to the ocean, or he found her there years before, a child without origin, baptized into a name that was never truly hers. And if that is true, then the mourning bride did not sink because of a debt. It returned something that never belonged to land. The ocean does not crave flesh. It craves remembrance. And somewhere beyond the breakers of Salem Harbor, beneath water that is carried centuries of secrets, something stands upright in the dark, listening as mothers whisper names over basins, as priests lower infants into water, as lovers carve initials into docks. Waiting, not to drown you, but to decide whether you were ever meant to leave.